The notion that we would forego exporting a product that the world is clearly going to need and a product that can clearly displace a vastly less attractive product in coal, I would say to you that it's actually our moral obligation to develop infrastructure and to provide this product to the world. I'm Harris Fricker. I grew up in northern Cape Breton, a little town called Ingonish, in the middle of the Cape Breton Highlands National Park. So I very much consider myself an environmentalist, given I first 18 years of my life were in the wilderness, which I treasure. I've lived abroad for a long period of time, and I'm kind of emblematic of the success this country holds for people who have a work ethic. And why I'm speaking today is very simple. I want to add to the quality of the discussion on our infrastructure strategy, because what we decide today is going to impact our future and the future of our kids for the next 40, 50 years. So when we talk energy infrastructure, the thing that we have to ensure we're doing is we're grounding the discussion in the context of what's happening globally. The best source of those facts is the International Energy Agency, which is a department of the OECD. It publishes its annual report, the World Energy Outlook, every year. And the facts arising from the IEA data are quite striking. Basically, the IEA projects that in 2040, the world's population will grow by 2.2 billion to 9.2 billion. And concurrently, the world's energy needs are going to increase by about 27, 28%. The ability to meet those energy needs is going to be critical. And when you boil it down, the sources of the energy are going to be oil, at about 27% of the global energy stack in 2040, gas at roughly 25%, and surprisingly, coal, still 22% of global energy demand in 2040. The renewable section, including bioenergy, biomass, wind, solar, less than 20% of the global energy need will be met by those sources in 2040, and the balance will be in nuclear at about 6% versus its current 5%. So wind and solar, yes, viable in certain parts of the world, projected to grow quite dramatically, but still only meeting a very small portion of the projected energy needs of the planet in 2040. And what that means is that you're going to have to start looking for opportunities within consumption and projected consumption to lower emissions via replacement of the more polluting forms of carbon on the planet with more viable forms. For example, if coal is projected to be 22% of the world's energy needs in 2040, the implications for that are quite striking and dramatic when you consider that coal emissions currently represent half of the CO2 emissions on Earth. Coal is easily the least attractive hydrocarbon or form of carbon energy. It's massively polluting. It degrades the air, it degrades the water. And yet in the developing world, coal usage is going to increase dramatically because the people in that part of the world are not being offered an option. And the option from the hydrocarbon world is liquefied natural gas, which is 50 to 60% less polluting, is safe, cost-effective, easily transported, and represents a highly viable alternative to coal in the energy grid. Now, when you look at liquefied natural gas and gas in general, Canada just happens to be a gas superpower. We have an abundance of gas in Western Canada. We have a Pacific and an Atlantic coastline, so access to both Asia and Europe time advantaged over our competition in the US. We have a very good product, and we have access to tidewater on both coasts. What we don't have is the ability to move product to tidewater on both coasts, because the discussion over energy infrastructure has somehow become rooted in the fallacy that we don't need hydrocarbons in the future. And as I've discussed, that's simply a false construct upon which to build an energy infrastructure for an exporting country like Canada. In fact, I would say that the moral high ground is easily occupied by those who would say, how are we going to meet the needs of 9.2 billion people in 2040, 1.2 billion of which the IEA projects will have no access to dependable electricity? That is a crisis in the making. And if we're not going to provide LNG to those markets are going to continue to burn coal, with all of the environmental, societal impact of that source of energy. So far from taking an amoral or immoral position when we're advocating for energy infrastructure, we're actually advocating for what Canada has always done. And that's been the gold standard for development of development of our resources in a way that is congruent with the environment and with the peoples affected by the projects. We are the gold standard. Why wouldn't we, given our blessings of resources, our access to both Asia and Europe from our coastlines, our tradition of providing product to the world and both meeting needs in the world and benefiting from it economically, why aren't we hard at work building energy infrastructure in order to pipe product to both coasts and be in the LNG export game, where we know there's a global need, where we can meet that global need, and we're positioned to meet that global need in an environmental and societal way that isn't going to be matched anywhere else in the world? Why aren't we at work constructing that infrastructure?